Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo and welcome to day 197 of a year of change and the beginning of another week, week 29. We're starting today. As per usual, I don't know if we've really done this very recently. Anyway, in the past 2 or 3 times that we've done this, we've always sort of been focusing on our changes. We do your way in, as per usual. I know that we keep saying it's sort of secondary, but it is part of what we're doing. So don't forget. We gotta do our weigh in. I did my weigh in this morning. I was a little concerned that maybe I hadn't made much progress. I was right. Didn't lose as much as I would like, but I did my whining yesterday, so we're okay. I still lost. I still made progress, and that's the main thing. That it's may not be as fast as I would like, but it's still progress. So anyway, today we're going to actually we haven't done a change in a long time, other than just watching our levels of sodium and fat and everything else. And last week we started looking at just our sugar intake, trying to find out exactly how much sugar we're bringing in, added sugar and regular sugar from food and stuff like that. But we haven't really made any drastic changes. We don't have one today, don't worry. We not a drastic one, bit of a change, but it's going to make sense when we're ready. So I told you yesterday that I had sort of gone through and done my numbers. I did them again this morning, just so that I would have a full week and a full month of numbers to look at properly. Because doing them yesterday, it was going Friday to Saturday instead of Sunday to Saturday. Saturday to Friday. Anyway, I was off by a day. So, I have some numbers. This is going to show you just how much sugar that I'm taking in. Yours may be more, yours may be less. It depends. But as you've been going through the past week, we've been looking at the nutrition labels. We've been seeing just how much sugar is in everything. And doing that quick conversion of looking at it and saying, well, 4 grams is a teaspoon, trying to measure things out that way has probably helped. Now, in general, every now and then, obviously, as we all do, we have those moments when we go, good, I'm going to have some jujubes or some cookies or something bad, and that's going to shoot my sugar up. But overall, our diets are doing fairly well at this stage. They should be anyway. We're eating lots of fruits and vegetables. We're eating, when we started looking at fat, we started looking at red meat and white meat and fish and all the other good stuff, trying to get healthier fats to replace the unhealthy fats. We've cut back on our sodium, things like that. But the sugar has just sort of sat on the sidelines because we haven't really paid much attention to it, just because it's in everything and there's really no way to avoid it. But also because it's a little difficult to sort of juggle all three. And we'll get to that in a bit. But for this week, there's a couple things that you can do. The first thing, you can go up to MyFitnessPal, go into your, or whatever app you're using. I use MyFitnessPal, and that's where I went. So you can go up and you can take a look at the past 7 days. So what your intake was for calories and fat and everything else. The fat thing doesn't seem to work. It doesn't track poly and monounsaturated fats. Don't know why. Anyway, but the sugar, it will track. So what I did, I went back and I added up all the sugar that I've eaten over the past week. And this is just everything that I've logged in MyFitnessPal. So this includes not just the regular stuff that I get from fruits and vegetables and meats and sauces and condiments, and but even the added sugar that I put in coffee and stuff from cereal and milk and just all that stuff. Which, by the way, I haven't bought milk since we did the soy thing. I still have the soy milk. It stays forever. And I haven't bought milk. So, yay. So that's probably helpful. Anyway, unrelated, but I thought you might want to know. So I've added up all those numbers. And in the past week, from Sunday to Saturday, inclusive, those 7 days, during that week, I took in, I gotta have to look at my cheat sheet, 527 grams of sugar. Which sounds like a lot. And it is, because it's a pound. It's a little over a pound of sugar in a week is what I've taken in. Not just from adding it to my coffee, but just from every source. So when you you can divide that by 4, divide it by 4.2, which is the actual number. If you're doing all this adding, probably best to do it by 4.2, just so it's a little more accurate, but it's not that much of a difference. If I divide by 4.2, it gives me roughly 125 teaspoons. If I divide by 4, it gives me 130. So a 5 teaspoon difference over a course of a week, to give you an idea. 1 teaspoon a day, I suppose, roughly. Anyway, we're going to go with 125. So 125 teaspoons of sugar is how much I've eaten in the past week, which is a lot. It's it's one of those things that you can't go, yes, but I got it from this source and this source. We have looked at that. It doesn't matter what the source is. The sugar is the sugar. It's still carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, those little molecules all in there together. I can't remember the number. 22, 11. Is it 22, 11, 22? Shit. I don't know. Anyway, I'll put it up on the screen. Anyway, it doesn't matter what source it's from, whether it's from just granulated sugar that you're putting on your cereal, or if it's through honey because you think, oh, it's more natural, so I'll put that in my tea. Molasses, fruit, vegetables, milk, whatever it is. I'm going to put in some good stuff there because there are some sugars in, regular things like other plants and vegetables. So wherever the source is, it's all the same. It's still sugar. So 125 teaspoons averages out to around 2 cups. I'm lying. 2 2/3 of a cup. So almost 3 cups of extra sugar in 1 week is how much I've taken in, which is quite a bit. So it's roughly a pound of sugar. So I looked at that number and I went, okay, good enough. That is for a full week. That's taking in absolutely everything, assuming that things are being tracked properly. When we're doing stuff like this, and when you go up and you add up your numbers, if you go into reports on the website, it's probably easier to do it there. Go into reports, go down to sugar, and you'll just need to manually add them up, which is why I didn't do 6 months down the road, because I'm not adding all those numbers. So when you go in and you take a look at that, it's assuming that you've tracked everything properly, that the entries that you've put in are accurate for sugar. So these could be way off. These could be, I could have 700 grams of sugar. I could have 200 grams of sugar. But for our purposes, for what we're doing, we'll have to deal with the inaccuracies and just say, good enough, I'm assuming I'm tracking everything I should, and everything that I am tracking is registered properly with the amount of sugar that's in there. So you can go in, you can take a look, add up your numbers, and you'll get your number for the week. I also added in my entire month of September because I wanted to have sort of just an overall view of how much I've taken in. Not an average, but just overall, the amount of sugar. And for September, I got to look at my sheet again. Sorry. I've taken in 2,848 grams of sugar. So 2.8 kilograms, which is a little over 6 pounds of sugar in a month. That's a lot of fucking sugar. It averages out to around 14.25 cups of sugar, or 712 teaspoons of sugar over the course of an entire month in September. So that'll give you sort of an idea of where I stand. Yours may be more, it may be less. But one thing, don't panic. Don't freak out. To put things into perspective, this does add in all the sugar I add to my coffee, or if you have tea, whatever it is that you have there. Natural sugars that you're getting from fruit and vegetables and everything else. When I have my coffee, I've actually started cutting back, so I'm only putting in 1 sugar now, which is 4 grams. I was doing 2, which was 8. I'm having 3 or 4 a day, which is not good, but to put it in perspective, an apple has 16 grams. So, look at it that way. And I know, again, it's one of those things you think, well, it's a better source of sugar. It's the exact same. There's no difference. Getting 16 grams of sugar from an apple, I get the same amount of sugar in my coffee. Probably a little bit more, actually. No, for probably about the same, because I have 2 sugar, which is 8 grams, and then 3 cream. So there you go. So however much sugar is in the cream. So it's roughly the same amount of sugar. It's the exact same source. The difference is that, and I'm just going to keep using the coffee and the apple, because as opposed to like a Twinkie or a cookie, we know all the extra bad shit that you get in there. With the coffee, aside from the cream and the sugar, there's really nothing in there. But with an apple, you're still getting fiber, you're still getting vitamins. So in that case, yes, it's a better source of your sugar than going for cookies, or in my case, jujubes, stuff like that. The sour candy, stuff like that. We need to sort of get away from. We can still have it from time to time, but our main goal, obviously, is to get to a point where that's not what we're eating all the time. And that's what our problem is that we don't just have, I'm just going to have a handful of jujubes, and then I will continue on with my fruits and vegetables. We just eat bowls and bowls, and we did for a long, long time. For some of us, for decades. That's what our eating habit was like. It's just sugar and fat and salt and everything else. So anyway, that should put it into perspective for you, just exactly how much I've taken in. So over the course of a month, I've had a little over a bag and a half of sugar, just the regular bags that you can buy, to give you an idea. That will put things in perspective. And in just so roughly half a bag of sugar a week. That's weird. Anyway, around half a bag. Yes, it could be different all the time. Anyway, which sort of leads me to our issue for the week, because it's when we started doing sodium. Although it was very difficult for me, the actual tracking and cutting back wasn't too bad, because you're just tracking one thing, you're keeping an eye on it, and we have a range somewhere between 1,500 2,300 grams per day on average throughout the week. So we're going to be up, we're going to be down, it's going to be okay, as long as we're sort of hovering around there, which I'm still struggling with. But I've cut way back. Like, I don't even put salt on my food anymore, like as much as I should. I shouldn't say that. I'll put in like 1 or 2 turns instead of 30 or 40. And that's not exaggerating. We've done the measurements. We know how much is in there. So that has helped a great deal. When we started looking at fat, we could balance the two of them, because the sodium levels we can look at and say, good enough, low sodium is okay. And we're replacing the unhealthy fats with healthier ones. Try to get away from saturated fats and start eating more unsaturated fats, cooking with olive oil instead of butter, and using non-hydrogenated stuff to try to stay away from the trans fats, all that stuff. So it's a little easier that way. When we start adding in a third thing, it wouldn't be as bad if it wasn't sugar. If it was anything else, if we were going to say, okay, well, we're going to start in on fiber. Good. So I need something, we can keep an eye on the sodium levels. My fats are okay, and then see if I get something that has a little bit more fiber with cereal or something like that. With sugar, because it permeates everything, it's in everything that we eat, trying to balance those out is going to cause an issue. If we try to keep our sodium low, and our fat low, and the sugar low, then you end up with nothing. You've got no flavor, you've got rice cakes. We don't want to get into that, because once we start in on that, then that's what you're eating. You start restricting foods. You start saying, well, I can't eat that anymore. I'm not talking about junk foods and snack foods and stuff like that. I'm talking about real food, stuff that we've been sort of gradually adding in, additional fruits and vegetables, raw meat instead of buying processed frozen hamburger patties and stuff like that. Stuff that we can prepare ourselves. Once we start looking at the sugar content and stuff and start taking things away, then it starts becoming a diet. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to ever get to a point where we say, well, I can't have that. I'm not allowed to eat that. And then I can't have this. Well, this one is too much, so I can't do that. So it is going to be a little bit more difficult. So in the case like this, where we have these 3 things working together, we do need to prioritize. And as we've seen over the past 2 months, the fats are not really an issue. Just trying to stay away from unhealthy ones and adding in more, like replacing it with healthy ones. We can replace that. It's okay. The sodium is really more a matter of your palate. Cutting back on the amount of sodium that's in stuff. Not adding extra salt to your food. You can get accustomed to that. That's not a problem. The issue with sugar is that although it is something to do with your palate the same way that fat and salt is, when you cut it out completely, then everything just tastes horrible. You can't cut down on the fat and the sodium and the sugar and expect your diet to stay the same. So we need to prioritize. And as we've seen over the past couple of months, out of the 3 of them, the most dangerous one, most likely, again, not a doctor, this is what we've seen, this is what we've looked at, making an informed decision here, the most dangerous thing there is the sugar. So if you have to prioritize and say, okay, if you're looking at a label of something and it has high sodium and low sugar as opposed to low sodium and high sugar, I would go for the sodium one. I know that's not great, it's not healthy, but we have to sort of play this balancing act between the two of them. That if you start cutting out everything where it's low everything, then the flavor goes and we won't stick to it. Our goal isn't to get into a diet where we're just eating nothing but crackers and water. We need to have a balanced diet. And that balancing act is going to be a little difficult with this third one in there. But there are ways around it. So this brings us to our change for the week. This week, we haven't really done a major change, really. The past couple of months have been more of an education thing. We've tried to cut back on the amount of salt that we're using, which is fine because then it's just things just don't taste as salty. It's okay. It still has flavor to it. You can still, you still enjoy it. Same thing with the fat. We haven't gone into low fat or fat-free anything because it just jacks up the sugar. With sugar, though, there are a few things that we can do that's going to help. And our change this week is just to cut back a little bit. Now, last week, I took in 527 grams of sugar. So, in order for me to cut back effectively, I can't just say I'm going to cut out sugar. It's not going to work. I eat a lot of fruit, and there is a lot of sugar in fruit. I have started cutting back a little bit on added sugar, and that's what we need to look at. So, little things like, actually, we'll stick with the numbers for the time being. 27 grams of sugar. Whenever you go up and you do your week-long add up, and we won't be doing this every week, per se. We're just going to do this for this first week, and these are the numbers we're going to go by. Well, actually, we are going to have to do it later on. That was really stupid, because we're going to have to add again. Anyway, so add up all your sugars from last week, because we were just being aware of it. We weren't really paying attention. We weren't trying to cut things out. So we're just going to say that we'll go with my numbers. 527 grams of sugar is what I took in this week. So my goal for this week, going ahead, is not to cut way back, not to cut out sugar, not to stop eating all the little fiddly bits that are so good for everything. But we do need to start cutting back on added sugar. So we're going to cut back by 10%. It's a small enough number that it's manageable. It's something that we can probably do. And it's not going to be something that's so big that it's just going to be impossible. We may not reach it, but we need to set a certain goal for ourselves to say, okay, this is what I'm going to strive for, to see how realistic this is. So out of the 527 grams, we're going to round up to 530 just so I can take 10% off. I'm going to take away 53 grams. I'm going to do quick math, and there we go. So, sorry, really bad math. So my goal for this week is to not go above 474 grams of sugar. I may not reach it, but that's my goal. And when you go in and you add up your week, just round up, or round. If it's 571 grams that you're at, then yeah, average to 570. So average it out, or round up, round down, whatever you want to do. Take off 10%, and that's your goal of sugar for the week. I know that MyFitnessPal has a sugar goal in there as to what we should be taking in. This is mainly to see how feasible this is, because we're pretty much going to be over our sugar goal anyway. And the thing is, sugar really doesn't have too much of a nutritional value to it. It's not like you can say, well, we got to cut back, but we still need it. We kind of do, but aside from quick, short bursts of energy, it doesn't give us anything. It just says, I'm here and I don't have any energy to burn, so yeah, I'll just store myself as fat. It'll be fine. That's all it does. So getting to a point where we can sort of cut back is going to be helpful. And a few ways that we can do this, and these aren't going to be major things. When you're looking at your labels, if there's something that you regularly buy, you don't have to say, good enough, I have to get the sugar-free version of it, or because then you're adding in sweeteners, which then is the same thing as adding in supplements and everything else. Just no. Little things, cutting back on the sugar that you put in your coffee. Those numbers actually may not be exactly accurate, because during the week I've started to cut back on the sugar I put in my coffee, and I drink a lot of coffee. So I used to get 3 cream, 2 sugar, but I've cut back to 1 sugar. It's not a big difference, but there's 4 grams of sugar in a packet. So if I have, say, 2 coffees a day over the course of 5 days, then that's another 40 grams. Is that right? Yeah, it's another 40 grams down. So it actually would be less than 500 grams in total. So it may not be exactly accurate, but it gives us a ballpark. So little things like that. Cut back a little bit on the amount of sugar that you put into your coffee or your tea. You could say, well, I'm going to replace it with honey because it's more natural. It's the exact same. Aside from the flavor, there aren't enough things in there like vitamins and minerals. I don't even know what a mineral is. There aren't enough things in there to really say, yes, it's a healthier choice. It's the exact same thing. Your body has no idea it's any different than the granulated sugar. So cutting back a little bit on things like that. If you put sugar on your cereal, cut back. Take 1 spoonful less, or half a spoonful, or however much you put on. You don't have to cut it in half. Cut a little bit out. Little things like that. If you're eating, like me, a lot of fruit and stuff like that, then try to sort of steer away from the bad candies, which we all still are going into. Just little things like that are going to help you make tiny changes once again to just cut back to see where we are, to see if it can be done. And it's the added stuff in there. I mean, we aren't going to be able to avoid it. We talked about this before last week. You're not going to be able to avoid all the sugar that's in food anyway. It's absolutely everywhere. The only thing that we can do is try to cut back on the extra amount that we're putting in that we don't really need. Like cookies and cakes and junk food and all the other stuff goes without saying, but it's all the extra stuff that we put in that we don't really think of. If you're a smoothie person and you decide in the morning I'm going to have, banana and some milk and throw in a teaspoon of sugar. Well, do half a teaspoon, something like that. Like when you cut back a tiny little bit like that, it does add up through the course of a week. And it doesn't take much. So that is our goal for this week, to cut back by 10% once you add in all your numbers, just to see, where you can. The main goal of this isn't necessarily to get your sugar down to where it needs to be. Some of you, if you're diabetic, then you already are doing this and you already have much more control than any of us are going to have. But it's mainly to get to a point where it's going to force us to look at where we can cut back practically. Not to get to a point where we're all of a sudden this has become a diet, but just to get to a point where we can look at it and say, no, I can cut back here. It's not going to kill me. I can cut back 1 sugar on my coffee, and your palate will get used to it. And then eventually I know I'm going to be cutting that other sugar out, and then probably cutting out one of the creams, and then 2 or 3. So I want to get to a point, because I still enjoy coffee. It's just that I used to have 5 sugar in it, 3 cream and 5 sugar. I've gone from 5 sugar down to 1. So it can be done. You can do it. But it does take time, because you've got to get used to it. The same thing with the salt. I'm still not entirely used to having food that doesn't taste salty. And a lot of food still doesn't taste salty enough for me. And there are times I think, this could use some salt. But what was it, last week or the week before? I bought some cashews. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to have salted cashews. It's going to be very bad for me, but at least I'm getting something from the cashews instead of getting it from cookies or something. And it was far too salty. So it is working. The changes are helping a little bit. Little bit. So with the sugar, the same thing will happen. Even though you can say, well, I really like it that way. Your palate will get used to it. All the extra added stuff that's in there, if you're buying, frozen pizzas and things like that, you can't do anything about that. It's gonna be in there. But the sugar on our cereal, or in your coffee, or in your morning smoothie, or if you go and if you say, well, yeah, in the mornings or at the end of the day, I go and I get a donut from wherever, then get a smaller donut. Get a donut that doesn't have, as much icing on it or something, or one without sprinkles. There you go. Little tiny changes, things that you can cut out that you can go, no, it's not, it's not the best, but I know I'll get used to it. I'll still enjoy it. Once we start getting into, we can't have this, we can't have that, and eating things that we just absolutely hate, that's when we're going to start breaking apart and just not sticking with it. So, anyway, that is our goal for this week, to cut back a little bit, to force us to look at different places and say, yeah, I can cut back from there. It's not going to be the end of the world. It'll still be okay. And every tiny little bit helps in the long run. So, that's it. But for right now, I'm going to leave this video here because I feel like I'm going to start summarizing once again, and I don't want to do that. I've tried to keep these under half an hour this week. I've done fairly well. So I'm going to try to keep these nice and short, and so that you're not sitting there going, you said this 5 times, I don't know why I started texting. This is how I watch YouTube. It's like all the time. Anyway, I'm going to leave this video here. So thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. And in the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.